have some bad news, humble thinker. I checked my closet and I ran out of pine points. Hey Chris, welcome. Just hang on a second.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah, you're coming through. Just hang on. Just kidding, humble thinker. 1,000 pine points for you.
I can't see you yet.
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
We got to set up a few things here. I think I'm almost ready to go. Thank you for doing this on short notice, by the way.
Yeah, well, it worked out. So. Should be fun.
So if you want, you can share the link to your mom and dad, your sisters, your uncles, your aunts, your nephews, your nieces.
Just the link to your YouTube page?
Yeah.
All right. Hopefully, I think I've done that.
Warn them that I'm an atheist, though, so they have their guard up.
Oh, I did. It wouldn't be nearly as interesting if I hadn't mentioned that.
I actually think I bet you think I'm not an atheist.
Oh, well, no, I haven't thought that, but I don't know. Maybe we'll find out that I do think that. We'll see. Oh, there's your green screen. That's so cool.
Yeah.
You're just floating in the midst of a sea of blue.
Sea of blue. Calm and relaxing. Because most Christians, when I tell them about myself, they say I'm not an atheist.
Oh, really? Why do they say that?
Because I'll say something like this. I don't say there isn't any gods of any sort. There could be. But I don't live my life like it's true. And they say, oh, well, you're not an atheist then. You're just agnostic.
Yeah, I think it's really hard to say. I don't know. I'd just let you identify yourself, probably.
Yeah, I like identifying myself as an atheist because that way Christians are more scared of me.
So if I label myself a Christian, does that make you scared of me as well?
No, it only works one way.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Okay.
Because according to the scriptures, I'm under the dominion or the power of the evil one? It's
probably both the same thing.
Yeah. But thanks for doing this on short notice. This is Chris Gadsden. Did I pronounce your name right? There's a D in there.
Gadsden. Right? There's two D's in there, one on either side of the S.
Did I put two D's in your? Oh, I did. I spelled your name right. Okay. So we know each other going way back to Blab days when you talked to Anthony Magnabosco. Remember that?
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And that's why I remembered you from those days when you talked to Anthony. And I remember you saying, I don't want to talk about this tonight, but I remember you saying this a long time ago, that one of the reasons you had for becoming a Christian was because of some Christian rock concert or something. Remember that?
That's right. Yeah, no, that's right.
And so when we were talking tonight on Facebook, on the SE Learning Group, that's why I brought that up.
Oh, yeah, I knew exactly.
Okay, I wasn't sure if you put two and two together there, but but for the people listening in, you were interested in my library thought experiment. You saw that video I did with Inspiring Philosophy.
Yeah, I thought it was very interesting.
And so I suggested, hey, if you want to, I can try the thought experiment on you. And you said, sure. Right?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's fine. I mean, of course, I'm going to have some pushback on the thought experiment, but on what it actually shows and what follows from the thought experiment. But I'm seeing some delay in the video. Is that just me seeing that, or is? Oh
yeah, no, it's a 7 to 10 second delay. So just like in radio, turn the broadcast off, turn the YouTube thing off, unless you want to watch the comments. But it might distract. It might distract you.
Well, I'll turn off. I'm watching you. I'm watching the. So I just have the PineCreek thing up, and I've got two panels.
Just watch the peer screen, like the one that you've clicked on to get here. And
so on the left side of my screen, I've got me, and the other side, I've got you and me.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Just just look at yourself. Don't even worry about me. So the thought experiment is just a way to figure out if one's epistemology is consistent, and it's even just maybe not even that. It's just to see, as an interesting thought experiment, what pushes one to believe or not believe.
Right.
And so the whole setup is you're in a library, so imagine a shelf, an empty shelf.
Right.
But on the right side of the shelf, let's say it says history or historical. And on the left side of the shelf, let's say it just says ahistorical. We won't even call it fiction.
Okay.
Just something other than historical. And you and I work at this library, and we check the mail, and in the mail is this book, but it has no label on it. The front cover's torn off. Nothing on it. All it is just text. We don't know who wrote it, when it was written, where it was written, nothing.
Right.
But we have been assigned the task to figure out where on the shelf we should put it more towards the history part of the shelf or a history. And so you and I open up. So this is where the thought experiment. It's not quite normal how we would do it, because you wouldn't start in the middle of the book. But let's say we just opened up the book, read one page, and it said that a man ran and flew up into the air unaided, and that's all we've read so far.
Right.
So I would say that this should shift towards the non-history part of the shelf. And I would ask you, do you agree?
So, I hate to do this, but my worry is that the setup for the thought experiment has some problems that. So in other words, like when I read something on the internet, right, I see a Facebook article or something that says it has some news story, and I'm like, that's strange. And it might make a claim, like some really outlandish claim, perhaps, like you're describing. And I'm really not, I don't want to appear as if I'm trying to evade the thought experiment or avoid what you're trying to say. So let me see if I can make a point and then come back to what you're doing here. So if I saw something like this on Facebook, which happens all the time, right? You see these articles, news articles, or some kind of article that sounds a little bit far-fetched. What I encourage people to do is to say, well, you shouldn't make any conclusions about the truth or falsity of that article until you've read it, until you've examined it, until you've looked at the information you have, looked at the evidence. Yeah, go ahead. You're hitting time out.
We're not making any conclusions here. At any time, we can change our minds. And we're not saying that for sure it's history or that's not history. All I'm saying is, I read this one page. It says a man flew unaided, and I am inclined to shove this book towards the non-history part of the shelf. And my question to you is, how about you? Are you inclined the same way?
So if I read the story, and we had this talk on Facebook a little bit, yeah, of course I'm skeptical. I'm going to think that sounds far-fetched. That sounds like some sort of make-believe story.
Okay.
But so I'm gonna play along with you for the moment and just say, yeah, that would be my initial impression.
Okay. And so my cards are on the table here. This thought experiment is to show inconsistencies with what I believe some Christians in with the cumulative case argument. So,
Sure.
So let's, now that that's out in the open, and that I'm trying to, I guess, trap you, embrace the trap, and let's think together. What would be like 5 to 10 top evidential type reasons for the resurrection, like martyrdom? What else?
Well, I would say the fact that, people claimed that it happened and that it's the inference to the best explanation case. What's the best explanation?
I want specific bullet points, like what are like the minimal facts ones? Let's say empty tomb, something like that.
Sure, empty tomb. You have the eyewitnesses. You have the accounts of the Gospels.
Changed lives.
Changed lives. Sure, the standard ones.
What else we got here? We got martyrdom, eyewitnesses, empty tomb, changed lives. We had like enemies, like Paul.
The body was missing. Empty. Oh, we already said empty tomb.
Yeah, body, empty tomb. Let's say body missing.
The appearances, the resurrection appearances. You know, there's some other interesting things, like that the first witnesses were women, that the account portrays or just talks about the first witnesses being women.
Okay, first witnesses being
We
women.
can talk about that. I mean, that's an interesting point.
What else do we have? Appearances, eyewitnesses, empty tomb, body missing, changed lives, enemies, Paul. Oh, we got a creed. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I got 7 right there. If you think of any others, we can go. So,
Sure.
So if we, instead of saying flying man, we'd say man resurrected from the dead after 2 or 3 days. I would be inclined to put that towards the non-history part of the library. How about you?
Yeah, the same.
Okay,
What this shows so far is, and I think you probably remember this, I posted this on your Facebook or on your YouTube comments. The argument that I hear so far goes something like this.
Well, actually,
If
let's just go on with the thought experiment. We're having fun, right?
Well, thought experiments imply arguments, right? Obviously, to eventually establish some kind of conclusion.
Well, why don't we
there has
talk?
to be an actual
We can talk
argument.
about the thought experiment after we're done it. How's that?
Well, so what the thought experiment is showing so far is that you should not believe something that is has a low probability based on a fragment of evidence.
Yeah, exactly right. So
Right.
let's keep going.
Sure.
I'll just pick the middle one here. Change lives. So we open up another page in the book, and in the book it says that that because of this flying man, people's lives are radically changed. It says in one page. They went from one state of being to a completely different state of being because they saw the flying man. Now, right now, I think both of us have this on the far right side of the shelf in the ahistorical part of the library on the shelf. That still doesn't change it for me, because I'm thinking to myself, well, this could just still be part of a story, and just because their lives change, people's lives change all the time from having deeply held beliefs. That doesn't mean the deeply held belief that they have is actually true. So I would still leave it where it is. How about yourself?
It would probably take a few. It'd probably take the accumulation would probably have to build up a little bit more to start to make a case.
Great. So far both of us are the same. We still leave the flying man towards the non-history part of the shelf.
I'm probably slightly more interested in the story at this point.
Oh, I am too. I'm still interested, but I'm definitely not shifting it towards history yet. How about you?
Well, what I'm interested in is why do I have this data? Right.
We got it in the mail.
So I'm trying to explain. What's that?
We got it in the mail anonymously.
Right, but the book contains this data, and so in my mind, as any human being naturally does, is you're trying to construct some sort of schema to explain the data. This is what a scientist does with data points in an experiment. You have a graph of data, and you're trying to maybe plot a curve that explains the data. So,
but our job
now I have 2 data points.
Right, we have 2 data points. Well, actually, we only have one. The first was the claim that a man flew, let's say, and the first data point to support that claim was that people who saw this man fly, their lives have been radically changed from it. And that doesn't change it for me. And I think, did you give me an answer on that, if that changes it for you?
Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to say. I think at this point, my initial, I can't simply assign it to fiction. It's becoming more difficult to explain, I would just say.
Okay. Why couldn't you just say this is a story? Isn't that a pretty good explanation?
Well, I could. Well, so are we continuing to read more of the account, or are we going to stop there?
No, we're going to keep going. I'm just making sure that we're both on the same page. Because for me, what's interesting is how, let's say, atheists and Christians differ in their reasoning and so how they come at things. So I'm more interested in where we actually start to diverge. And so far, I think we're both on the same page, but maybe not.
We're pretty darn close. I'll just say that.
Okay, so let's say we're pretty darn close. So that was the first data point. Let's put a second data point in, and that is the creed. Like in 1 Corinthians 15, there's a creed about Jesus rising from the dead. Let's say we flip it on a different page of the book, and we read that there was a creed, a well-known creed that many people believed about the flying man, and that this creed started within months, maybe even a few short years after the flying man flew. And so you and I say, oh, okay, we got this belief system, this creed about the flying man. I'm thinking to myself, well, just because there's a creed, that doesn't mean the creed is true or historical. So, and I know from past history that there's a lot of false creeds out there, false beliefs.
Right.
So I still wouldn't shift this towards history at all, the flying man. How about yourself?
Well, all the early creed does is it gives you a higher degree of confidence that the story of the flying man was not developed over a long period of time, that it was relatively the story was written down pretty close to the actual events. So if you said the creed was early within the lifetime of the authors, so that all that does is give you confidence that that the story was written down in a very close proximity to the actual events, which doesn't tell you whether it's true or not. It just tells you that what you have is a reliable account of the original writings.
Yeah, maybe. The creed that we found in this book says that, it was written after these events, so we don't know how long after.
Sure.
But yes.
Yeah.
But
we don't know the time length.
We know it's just after.
That's a crucial bit of data.
Yeah. So let's say it was 6 days after. Would you move the flying man towards history if the creed happened 6 days after?
Not much. If at
Neither
all,
would I.
Because that doesn't give me much information about truth. But one of the realities here, Doug, is it Doug or Douglas?
Either is fine. You can call me Doug.
Okay. Is that we actually have more than 2 or 3 data points going, I would say, because.
Okay, but here's the kicker. You and I have agreed so far, and I love this. You and I are on the same page. Whether it's the changed lives or the creed, you and I would still say that doesn't mean it's true. We would still put it towards the non-history part of the library. Are we agreed?
Let me see here. Okay, so the non-history. This is such a strange thought experiment.
Don't think of it like you're defending Christianity. Just think of it as...
I'm not. I'm honestly trying to just go with intuitions here. One of the problems that I'm having a hard time getting over is, presumably if we're librarians, we have some training in these matters, right?
Right.
So we get a book, we would presumably know pretty quickly, even just looking at a page, whether it's been translated from another language. We would know the genre of the actual prose, whether it's poetic, whether
we don't know any of that yet. We don't know any of that yet.
See, all those things can be discerned just from reading the text.
Right. I'm layering in one thing at a time. So,
well, I know you want to do that, and I like the thought experiment, and I want to play along, but the truth is, when you read a text, even if you're just reading a page, you're going to have more information than you're.
I only got through three with Inspiring Philosophy, and it looks like I'm being shut down at 2. Can we go on or no?
Yeah, I'm game.
Okay, so are we agreed that just because there's a page saying that people's lives would change because of the flying man, that doesn't mean that would still probably be towards the non-history part of the library? That one data point.
So I've got an account of something that has a.
We actually been through this already, and you said yes. So we're so the second.
Yeah. No, I'm just walking through. I'm reviewing. So I'm just saying.
But now
so I've got this account of this.
But now we're adding a second one in. So either the creed individually or in combination with the changed lives, I haven't moved the flying man any closer to the history section. How about you?
Oh, so changed lives now. So we're reading an account we open another page and we read an account about how people's lives were changed.
Yeah, remember we talked about that 5 minutes ago?
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed that. So that we added that. So
So that was the
yeah,
first one, and now we're adding in the creed. So either in isolation or combined, my inclination is not to move the flying man towards the history section at all. How about you?
yeah, at this point, we're starting to get a set of data points that are very difficult to explain by simply dismissing it as a pure fiction. So I'd say at this point, I'm very I'm probably still undecided, but I'm actually saying, wow, this is interesting. I need to find a better explanation, because anytime you construct an explanation for data, as you acquire more data, you should probably adjust your explanation.
So you're saying that you would shift it towards history based on the
I mean,
creed and changed lives?
it's such an odd thing to say, is that, I mean, no one in a library shifts things from one direction to another. They open a book and they examine it and study it until they have a justified conclusion about where it goes. I mean, people don't
But would
read
you
one
sincerely,
page at a time.
but think of it as, like, you're a philosopher, right? By the way, if people came late, do you have a PhD in philosophy?
Yeah.
In philosophy of religion or?
No, just philosophy, but I'm an epistemologist primarily.
Okay. Okay, so for people who came in late, this is Chris Gadsden, and we're talking about the thought experiment in the library. What I'm talking about is I don't know how to say it, your inclination to believe or not believe that this is, leaning towards history or not history. And I think whether it's changed lives in isolation, you and I think both agreed that it would not shift towards history, or the creed. I think you said that you and I both.
In isolation?
Yeah, in isolation, the creed wouldn't do it, because not all creeds are true. Again, we're not making conclusions here. We're just seeing, but based on the fact that we're talking about a flying man, we both agreed that we started it towards the non-history part of the library.
Sure, yeah.
And now
I just have a fragment of evidence. You should probably withhold belief or be skeptical of something that has a low initial probability.
Right. So now I'm saying we take those two pieces of data points, change lives and creed, we put them in the pot and we stir them up. I would still keep it towards the the non-history part of the library. How about you?
So, okay, I think we started with the creed. I thought we started with another data point.
The changed lives. And
that was the first one?
Yeah, and now we're out to the creed.
Okay. My memory must be going, because I
got them written down here.
I can't read that, but I'll take your word for it.
I'm starring it. I'm keeping track.
Senility is creeping in early. So, so we've got, I would say 3 data points, because the actual text itself is a data point. But now, so we've got the creed, we've got the account, we've got the changed lives. So my initial hypothesis is probably needing to be revised. And I would say, at this point, I have a more difficult time explaining the data points by assuming that it's not true.
We're not explaining anything. We're just saying whether our inclination is to have this history or not history. We're not making any conclusions.
Yeah. Well, this is just how human minds work, Doug. I mean, I'm not.
Okay, no, that's fine. That's fine. If you would say that, are you saying now that it's more likely to be? Would you shift it towards the history side, or is it just nudging a bit closer to history in your opinion?
I would say like you, when I read that, I just read the account. I'm like, probably I don't believe this is true. I'm very skeptical. And as I gather data points, I'm moving towards the withholding. Far. Yeah, well, it's just 2 data points, but they're significant data points. So I'm moving towards the withholding. So I'm going to say, now, wait a minute. My initial hypothesis, how does my initial hypothesis accommodate these data points? And I'm having trouble fitting them into my hypothesis. So now I'm revising my hypothesis to a more of a withholding, undecided position.
So am I hearing you say you would be in the middle then, right in between history and not history?
Yeah, we're moving toward the middle, saying, at this point, I would say, okay, I need more data. Okay. Because assigning this is
okay. This is great. This is great. This is where we're different. Let's see at what point you actually shift towards history. So let's add in the appearances to eyewitnesses. So
Right.
So you and I read a different page of this anonymous book, and it says that that the flying man appeared to 500 witnesses.
Is that 500 witnesses saw him fly, or this
Yeah.
is after the flying?
No, 500 people saw him fly, actually.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's a really interesting data point because, I mean, this is one of the reasons why the gospel accounts are so hard to pin down, is because the way that the eyewitness accounts are described, if you're just making up a silly story, you might just say, and everybody saw it, but they give specific numbers, they give
It's a
more
round number,
detailed
though. It's
accounts.
just 500. It's not
Yeah,
503
and it's
or
probably
497.
it's probably not an exact accurate number. It's probably rounded off, or just to say a lot of people or something like that. So, but and then it names specific people, like the 12 apostles, right? So if the account was parallel, then we're talking about names of actual people who lived and could be interviewed or talked to, and to confirm that they actually
We
saw
don't know that. All we know is that we read the page and it says that that 500 people saw the flying man, but it doesn't give any names of who these people were.
If it's parallel to the biblical account, then it also names specific people, right? So,
Yeah, we're just talking about the 500 right now.
Okay, why are we excluding the apostles?
We can add them in later if you want.
Okay,
But you would think 500 is a big number, but for me, I'm thinking, okay, this could just be part of a story, and just because this book that we got in the mail says that 500 people saw a man fly, that doesn't mean it actually happened. And
well, see, I mean, there are other things involved, and I know you want to try to separate these out and keep them distinct, but I just don't see how you can, because when you're reading the text, you can read a text and look for cues of genre that tell you whether the person writing it thinks they're writing a fictional account or whether they're actually writing some kind of biographical.
But based on that,
account.
we're on the third data point. Based on the third data point, are you into the history section now because it says that 500 people saw the flying man?
I'm still in the middle. I mean, it's sitting in the holding tank saying further examination.
Okay, so you went from definitely not history to in the middle when we went from Changed Lives to the Creed. You started going towards the middle when I introduced a creed. And then you're still in the middle when I introduced 500. So now let's enter in specific names. Let's say a guy named Paul saw the flying man. He said, hey, I saw the flying man in addition to the 500. And so did 11 of my buddies or 12 of my buddies.
Right.
I personally would not move that flying man closer to the history section because I'm thinking to myself, okay, this could just still be part of the story. Or maybe these people... maybe the author's actually lying because he has other purposes in mind.
Could be.
Or maybe this author is actually just mistaken, and maybe what this author saying that he saw a flying man is maybe not really literally saw, but maybe just had an impression of a flying man or something in some vision or whatever. Anyhow,
those are all possibilities.
So that doesn't shift it for me. I'm still keeping the flying man on the non-history part of the shelf. What about you? Are you still in the middle?
Yeah, still in the middle.
Okay. So whether they're general eyewitness appearances or specific, you're still in the middle, not history, not non-history.
Yeah, there's some more information I'd probably want to look for.
I'm still very curious why you shifted from fiction or non-history to the middle at Creed, but...
Well, I think it was that the Creed was the second data point you said, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Do you know why you shifted from non-history to the middle of the show?
Well, it's almost just simply the accumulation of data points. But if you start out with just an account that sounds unlikely to be true, and then suddenly you have this Creed and you have this account of changed people whose lives were changed as a result of seeing the flying man.
But I've read fiction. You've read
really
fiction.
Curious at this point.
Like both you and I have read or watched movies that have tons of data points, but it's within the context of a story, and we wouldn't say that's history.
Right. Well, that's why it's so crucial to determine genre, which can be determined simply by reading the text, right?
But we're trying to figure out
if it started out, roses are
Which-
red, violets are blue, the flying man is great, and so are you, or something.
that's what we're
I'd
doing,
say,
though.
oh wait, this is a poem, right?
That's
But
what
if
we're
it's
trying to do
written
here. We're trying to
in
figure out the
in
genre.
the same genre with all the genre cues of like historical narrative or biography, then I'm saying, okay, well, the author obviously thinks he's writing something true, so that stands out to me, right?
I've seen.
And that could be determined just reading the original text.
Okay, we're on number 3. Let's add martyrdom. This is the 4th one.
Well, wait, this is 4, right?
Yep,
So
4th one.
you
That was
said
3.
changed lives, creed, 500, and then the 12.
Oh, actually, yeah, I'm combining the specific and the general appearances into one. So now we're number 4, martyrdom. So it says, we open up another page in the book, and it says that many were persecuted for their belief in the flying man, and some were even killed for their belief in the flying man.
Sure.
What does that do for you?
More data. I mean, this is just,
Does that shift you from
just-
the
I
middle
think
to
this
more
just-
history, or no?
I mean, so the middle is a wide range itself. So I'm moving across the middle, I'd say,
But
as the data increases. I mean, I've still got more questions,
But are you towards
but
the history now?
I'm moving more towards belief.
Interesting. So you're more towards the history side than the non-history side.
If what you mean by history is that I think it's true, then yeah. But I don't believe it's true yet.
Okay.
Right?
You
Does that make sense?
You don't believe it's true yet, but your inclination is to put it towards more history than fiction?
Well, if you want a sliding scale, which it sounds like that's what you're describing, right? That there's this sliding scale where on the far end over here is absolutely sure it's false, and the far end on the opposite side is absolutely sure it's true. And the middle is this undecided range where you're like, man, I'm not sure what to think of this. I mean, I'm still in the middle, but that range, you can move across that range.
But is your confidence more that it's history or fiction at this point?
Well, my confidence is higher that it's true than that it's false.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know. Okay, what?
But I would not
we've
say
done it.
that I would believe it.
So we've completed the thought experiment because you went from not history or fiction to the middle at data point 2. Went from changed lives to creed, and then but the eyewitnesses' appearances didn't budge you. But as soon as we hit martyrdom, then you went to sort of believing that it's more likely true than not that this is history. So my question is now, what would shift you back the other direction? What would you have to know about the martyrdom to go back to the middle? Because right now you're leaning towards history. What would you have to learn
What
about
would
the
I have to know about the martyrdom?
Yeah, that
Or
was
just
what
anything?
What data point would you have to learn to say, oh, I started shifting towards history when I learned about the martyrdom, but now I'm going to change my mind because of fill in the blank. What would change your
They
mind?
found the body. That would be a good one.
No. We're talking about the martyrdom. What would change your mind about the martyrdom?
So
And this, we're talking about the flying
so
man.
are you asking me whether I think the martyrdom is true or whether the martyrdom supports the belief in the flying man?
What would you have to learn to say, oh, these people actually never really did die for their belief in the flying man?
Well, I'd need evidence saying the opposite thing, right? So, which you might not find in that book, but you might find in other books.
Okay.
I mean, I don't see why we have to limit the case to one book. But if I don't have any, I mean, at this point, I'm just reading the accounts. If they appear to be historical, then I don't see why I should doubt that they're true.
Well, that's what we're trying to figure out. We're trying to figure out if they are indeed historical or more likely to be historical or not. So what if you learn that
But
the people who...
You mean true or not?
More historical or not? We're working in a library. We're trying to figure out if something's history or not. What section we should put it in other words.
Right.
So if you were to...
Well, you keep saying history, but I think what you mean is whether it's true or not, right?
Yeah, whether it reflects things that happened in the past. So my question to you is, what would you need to learn about the martyrdom to change your mind? And you said if we read on the next page that weren't martyred for
or in
that?
another book.
Or in another book?
Yeah, or in another book, or you had a contradictory account or some kind of incoherent view. Like on the very next page, they talk about all these great things that these people did after they died, or something like that. I mean, that would be a little confusing, and then
So
I'd
if
start to question.
so if I gave you a book today that said that the early Christians weren't martyred for their belief in the resurrection, you would change your mind?
Well, I don't really. The martyrdom has never been a part of my, like, personally, why I believe the resurrection occurred.
But would you then lower your confidence in that data point of martyrdom in Christianity if I presented you a book that said that the early Christians were not martyred for their belief in the
Would I
resurrection?
not? Would I then? Yeah, I if it was a credible book, yeah, done by actual historians, and I would say, wow, maybe I should lower my confidence that these guys were martyred. Sure.
Okay. You would need a credible book.
Yeah, well, I mean, if it's just written by some, you know, some Yahoo, but if it's written by a guy with a PhD or an actual historian who's done research, who's got archaeological evidence of some kind or
Okay,
historical evidence from
but when I brought up the data,
documentation, and those books are probably out there.
but what if the story of the martyrdom to begin with was written by some Yahoo? You need a credible
Well,
historian to debunk the martyrdom, but what if the martyrdom itself claim was written by some Yahoo? I'm talking about the flying man.
well,
I'm not talking about.
yeah, do I have any reason to think that it was a Yahoo?
Not yet. We can't go either
Well, then
way.
there's no reason to think it was a Yahoo. I
But
mean,
it could
you
have been,
can
right?
read a book and tell whether the person is competent to some degree just reading the book.
What if you learned that the people who died for their belief in the flying man actually never had a chance to recant, and they were going to be killed anyhow?
Never had a chance to recant. Yeah, I don't know. That might be interesting.
So let's say we read in the book. Let's say there was a towards the back of the book an addendum that says, hey, these are later traditions of the flying man, and there's no record of anyone given a choice. Either you recant or you die from your belief in the flying man. It just seems like they just died.
I guess. I really don't know much about the martyrdom. I've never really researched it. I haven't even read any books about it,
But yet it was the
honestly.
martyrdom that pushed you more towards history. So that's why I'm confused. For the flying
Well,
man,
now, see, you're asking me whether I believe that the Christian martyr accounts are true. That's a very different question than whether reading an account of the Flying Man martyrs would make me lean towards thinking that the Flying Man account is true.
but why did this
Those are
martyrdom?
two incredibly different questions.
I'm still unclear why the martyrdom made you believe that the flying man is more likely to be history or true.
Yeah, because if people die for something, that's something you ought to pay attention to as leaning towards, if you have no reason to doubt that these accounts are legitimate and factual, if you have no defeaters for this, then you ought to say, this is interesting. This counts as evidence in favor of. I mean, evidence is just whatever increases the probability that a hypothesis is true. So that increases the probability that the hypothesis is true. Now, it might turn out to be false, but from the information you would currently have, that is evidence in favor of the Flying Man account being true.
Yeah, I hear you, and I agree with you. But the situation that we have here is we have to overcome that initial placement of the book on the far side of one shelf towards the non-history portion. And I think you and I agreed that it was way out there. Like we were both skeptical, both thought this probably was not history. And it seems like we have many examples in history of people dying for things that they even think they know to be true. And sometimes even people die for things they know to be false.
I'm not basing my confidence on that single data point, though, right? You're kind of
Right.
harping that, but it's the accumulation.
Well, actually, no, but for you, it was the martyrdom that shifted you from the middle towards history. So that's why
Every piece shifted me.
but no, but you went from middle to believing in the flying man after
I'm
martyrdom.
still in the middle.
You're still in the middle?
No, I'm still in the middle, Doug. Yeah, absolutely. I said I don't currently believe it, but my confidence, right? You can have confidence in something without believing it. I mean, we may have different vocabulary, but this is the way I think about epistemology, is that if I think it's 50-50, then I'm right smack in the middle, right? I think it's a coin flip but that's,
Okay, well, let's see
I
if we
have
can-
at least 50% confidence.
Let's see if we can get you to believe it. Let's do one more here. We read another page in the book, and the book says that a guy who hated the flying man his whole life, he persecuted the flying man and anybody who liked the flying man before he flew. Anyhow, later on, it says in the book that this guy who hated the flying man actually saw the flying man fly and was a witness to it, and then became a follower of the flying man. Would you be more likely to shift it towards the history
Sure,
part?
that's more data. That's more evidence. That's just pushing me more toward belief.
Okay. So I guess, and see, this is where we're different. That doesn't nudge me one bit because of.
Yeah, that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah. And can you guess why it doesn't nudge me?
Well, I mean, there's probably multiple reasons, but one is because of the prior probabilities and assumptions that we come into this thought experiment.
No, we both had the
we
same
don't come
prior.
in as blank slate.
We both had the same.
What's that?
We both had the same prior. Right?
No, prior is what you come into before you start the thought experiment.
Okay, but on this specific case of the flying man, we both had the same prior.
Right.
We both said we were both skeptical. We both thought it was not
prior.
history.
A prior is what you have before you actually even start thinking about the case, right? So, for instance, I'm less. We all have biases, right? So I have a bias. I probably am more open to supernatural accounts being true than you are, and you're probably more resistant to those accounts, right? So that's a way we differ in our priors.
I still think we have the same prior. So before the thought experiment of the flying man, is your prior on flying man high or low? Where is it?
Oh, so prior on simply a person flying?
Yes.
Yeah, that would be very similar there.
That's what I mean. We both came into this with the same priors. But for some
Sure, well,
reason, you shifted and I didn't.
There are lots of priors that are relevant. That's one of them.
Okay, so we both entered this with the same prior. And why do you think the enemy of Paul, the enemy of the flying man, wouldn't shift me? Given that we both started the same prior.
Well, why don't you just tell me? That'd be more fun.
Well, it seems to me that in my life, the last 3-4 years of my life, I've been able to predict with a high degree of accuracy what theists are going to say before they say it. And I sort of wonder I starting to wonder if theists, Christians can do the same for me. So it'd be nice to know, like, why do you think the fact that an enemy of the flying man saw the flying man doesn't shift me towards it this is historical?
I have no idea. I mean, I could sit here and think about it for a while, but that wouldn't be much fun to watch. I don't know.
Well, can you think of examples where you can have an enemy change their mind on something and still it not being true, like the...
Oh, yeah, that doesn't make it true, for sure.
Right.
I mean, you're just saying it's possible for this to happen and it not be true, but that's a trivial claim.
Right, but now the question
what we're asking is, does it raise the probability that it's true?
Right.
And it certainly does.
But the question, I agree with you, but the real question is, does it raise it enough to overcome our prior, that you and I agree on, of the low probability of a man flying?
But Doug, you've given me all these data points in accumulation. Like, we're talking about the addition of all these data points is what is overcoming the prior, not one of them.
Right.
And we're not saying, does this one data point.
But this is exactly why I said when we started with the changed lives, we looked at that in isolation, pulled it back out. Then we added the creed. We put them one at a time, and then we combined them. We put both in, and then we pull that out, and then we put in the eyewitnesses, the appearances, and then we combine it with the rest. And it seemed like on each step of the way, you didn't get to historical until we got to martyrdom, and then that was the fifth one. And then you said, okay, your confidence has gone up that this is true or this is historical.
No, I have not said that it's true.
Or that
your confidence is going up, right?
That's what I said.
If you're starting
confidence has gone
from, say, 0, which is absolute certainty that it's false, to 100, which would be absolute certainty that it's true, I went from probably below in the denial range, which would probably be like below, say, 40, right? I went somewhere down there, somewhere in that lower region, and it moved up slowly with each data point into that middle region. But the undecided region could be anywhere between, it's a little arbitrary how we set the numbers, but there's a range in there, maybe between 40 and 60, that it's slowly moving up. But I don't think I've gone above 60 to get to belief yet.
Where do you think you are at?
Where do you
think you are at right now?
Oh, I don't know. Upper 50s.
Okay. So if this book was the Bible, you'd be consistent? You'd be you wouldn't believe it yet?
No, because I think the Bible has additional data points.
Right. I'm saying at this point,
you
would not believe in the resurrection of Jesus because of a creed, because of the enemies of Paul?
You're making the point that as the cumulative case is stronger than the case based on any one piece of evidence.
Right.
And as you add data points, as you add reasons, the cumulative case gets stronger and stronger and stronger.
All right.
And it should move you in confidence.
But you said you do not believe that the flying man is historical based on changed lives.
I'm really
creed.
close, but I probably need more information, just like I would need for the resurrection.
You're really close.
And there are some parallels that are missing.
Okay, so would you be really close but not believing, saying that...
Yeah, I don't know if I'm believing yet.
You're not believing in the resurrection of Jesus Christ based on the creed, the changed lives,
the eyewitnesses... Are we talking about flying man or resurrection? I don't know, I'm getting confused. Are we talking
Is your answer different?
Are you talking about the resurrection? Yeah, they probably would be a little different.
Because we're using the same data points, same pieces of evidence, right?
Well, see, it's going to depend on some of the details, because, if you're talking, we read a whole page, presumably in these accounts, when Paul talks about the witnesses and all these things, he also says why the resurrection occurred, right? There's a reason behind the resurrection that makes a coherent narrative of the whole thing. Whereas the flying man,
if I came up with a reason for the flying man, would that make you believe it?
Well, yeah. What is the narrative there? I guess I'd want to know, is there a coherent narrative?
Right. We could keep on adding. Chris, I agree with you. We could keep on adding data points. But my point is, I gave you 5 data points. You said you're close, but you're not believing in the flying man yet. And I said, okay,
sure.
If I give you the exact same data points as presented for the flying man, but now put them on the resurrection of Jesus, in order to be consistent, you would have to say you do not yet believe that a man rose from the dead named Jesus. Correct?
If that is my total evidence, is those 5 data points, no, it's probably not enough.
Okay, let's keep going until we get you to believe in Jesus again. Okay, let's say the very first people who saw the flying man. Oh, I want to make this as embarrassing as possible.
Well, we could just make it the same. If the flying man is not an ancient story, then yeah, you have to modify it. It was somebody, whoever the undesirables are in that society, that's who it was.
I'm going to take a risk here of offending people. I'm going to say that
it was the atheists. No, I'm just kidding.
No, I'm going to say that we read on about who the first people were that saw the flying man. But
sure.
When we're reading this, it's set in the southern United States in the 1800s.
Okay.
1800s, southern United States. This is the setting. We learned this on this page. And it says that the first people to see the flying man were the African Americans.
Right.
And this is in the Deep South.
Right.
Very, someone's going to believe that testimony?
Yeah.
So, would you now
That's a powerful piece of evidence.
So would you now shift this towards that the flying man actually flew?
This is hard. This is really hard.
It's a good thought experiment, right?
Well, the problem is with the resurrection, it's hard for me to bracket out and partition off all the other information I have.
I know. It's very
regarding
hard.
The resurrection.
It's very hard.
So just trying to strictly look at these data points. So I don't know. Would I believe at that point that Jesus rose from the dead? It's tough. I mean, part of what this thought experiment could do is to show that an atheist could be perfectly rational and not believing the resurrection given the same data points, which I am perfectly willing to accept.
Yeah. I'm okay with you. You know, people believing whatever they want to believe. What just boggles my mind and what's very curious to me is how and why we differ. And you were onto it when you said, well, maybe we have different priors, but I don't think we do. I think you and I, when we read things on Facebook, when we hear things in the news, when we even have people telling us certain things happen, I think you and I are just as skeptical.
Yeah, I mean, it depends what it is. I mean, so when I read, I'm willing to go out on a limb here and say, if I came across a story, and of course it's going to depend what the news source is and who's all that stuff, but or if it was just a person posting something, right? And they're talking about a miracle happening. I think you're more skeptical than I am about that claim.
Maybe you're right. But how many But you don't believe every miracle claim you hear. I'm sure of that, right?
No, not at all. But I'm more open to it, I think, than you are.
I just have a high standard. I'm not comparing myself to you, but from other Christians I've talked to, my standard of miracle is very high.
Yeah, well, it should be high. I think it should be high.
Like this curing back pain thing, like get real. Like legs growing, sure. Get real. Like, show me a crushed limb restored. Show me no limb restored. Show me, crushed eyeball restored. Like, those are the things that I think would impress me.
Yeah, no, I think we're both, going to be hard to convince on a lot of these things, and we're going to want a lot of information, a lot of evidence. But I would say, in terms of priors, where I would put that initial probability that could happen is going to be a little higher than what you would put the initial problem. I mean, some atheists would just put it at 0, like it's just impossible. So I'm not even I would never even read the evidence because there's no point, because it's not even possible. You might think, well, it's possible, but I need a lot of evidence.
Yeah.
Like
the flying man, I would need more to overcome that. What? Now let's take it off the Bible for a second and go back to the thought experiment. So all the evidence for the Bible, let's just scrub that. Just between you and me and the 100 and some people watching right now, what would it take for you to believe a man flew unaided? Now you can say any answer is possible.
I mean, that'd be great.
Okay, yeah, you've seen it with your own eyes, but
if I can't see it, right?
But even then, like, would your first intuitions tell you that you're actually seeing a flying man, or that maybe something's wrong with your brain?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it really is going to depend on the details of the scenario, right? So how far away is he? Where are we doing? Is this inside or outside? I mean,
yeah,
all those things will change how easy it would be to fake it, that sort of thing, right? So if we're inside and it's like,
yes,
or it's on TV or something, I mean, it's easy to fake that. Like, but if we were outside and
what it would do
it
for
me anywhere,
what would do it for me is if I have a medical exam before I see it, and then so I know I'm in good health. Maybe take a few people with me, but I think you're exactly right. Go into I was raised on a farm. They have Quonsets. You can have like these potato sheds that are basically sealed. There's nothing that you can really hook up to anything because it's just like a half circle dome. And you bring the flying man claim guy into that building that he doesn't even know. You take him, say, this is the building of your choice, and you plop him right in the middle of this cold, dark, dank, empty, huge building and say, fly in front of all of us.
And he does it there.
And he does it. Then I tell you, okay, now we're on to something.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I appreciate that, So, I mean, and if I came to you and I said, Doug, I did exactly what I did. I set up all the conditions you just described, and I saw the flying man, and it was real, right? So now you have my account, and of course, we don't know each other super well, but you'd want to know a little bit more about me, obviously, to see how credible I am, or whether I would deceive you, or whether how gullible I am.
My standard would go up at that point. I would not believe you, even if I loved you like a brother. But what in that case where I couldn't see it for myself, like I would still have that belief. But if it's a secondhand, I would need like probably 5 TV stations from 5 different countries who hate each other, like BBC, NBC, Australian, whatever, Al Jazeera. They all come into this building in this potato building, and they videotape it, and they all like, whoa.
Well,
and then you show me the videotape, and then I go, okay, we're on to something.
Testimonially, if Richard Dawkins came to my house and said, Chris, you're not going to believe this, and he told me that story, and he said, I set up all the conditions. I mean, I looked at everything, I examined, and oh my God, it was real. I would probably believe him.
Oh, you shouldn't.
Because he is a hostile witness.
You shouldn't.
The guy
don't believe Richard Dawkins just because he says
if
something.
If Richard Dawkins were convinced, and I knew he wasn't like losing his mind or he wasn't on drugs, that is a really powerful testimony, and that's what we have in the Apostle Paul, right?
No, we don't.
Why not?
You're saying that Paul saw Jesus?
He did. Right? I mean, I believe him when he says he had a vision of Jesus. He didn't have this
For the same reason I said you shouldn't. For the same reason I said that you shouldn't believe Richard Dawkins, I'm saying you should not believe Paul.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, so these are where our priors are probably going to be different. I would be moved by Richard Dawkins' testimony of something like that. If he said he saw a miracle of some kind, I would be like, well, this guy has no reason to even want to believe this thing, but he's convinced. I mean, that's powerful. That's why the testimony of a hostile witness in a court case is more valuable than regular testimony.
What other explanation could there be for Richard Dawkins? That's all we have, right? Richard Dawkins? Not like the 5-camera crews?
Right, yeah, just Richard Dawkins.
What would be an explanation?
Oh, there could be lots of explanations.
Okay, name 1 or 2.
Well, he was on drugs. His mind is going, right? He had some kind of
He's what, over 70 now? Yeah.
Yeah, or somebody pulled the wool over his eyes, which you'd have to get up pretty early in the morning, I think, to do that to Richard Dawkins. But because I think he's a brilliant scientist and an intelligent person. And
your explanations, the explanations you just gave were brilliant. So my question is, why would you choose that a man actually flew over those explanations?
Well, see, that's the thing. I don't. Possibilities are not the same thing as actual defeaters. Like, if I have no reason to think that he's lost his mind or that he's on drugs or if everything that all the information I have points to a normal experience, then I should take his word for it.
Well, no. Don't we have many examples in history of people doing drugs?
Sure, but the thing is, I have no reason to believe he's on drugs. Well, now, I'd want to investigate. I'd say, okay, we would need a full talk screen now.
But all we know is he's told you that he saw a fly man. We have many examples in history of people doing drugs. We have many examples in history of people being senile. We have many examples of history of people lying. We have many examples of history of people being mistaken. How many examples of history do we have people actually flying?
I don't know. I guess
I don't know either.
I don't know. I mean, so Jesus ascended into heaven. That's the claim.
So my question is, like, when we're talking about having a good epistemology,
yeah,
sure, this man could have actually flew, but why would you believe even Richard Dawkins when he says this, even if he is an enemy to the supernatural, when you got all these other great explanations that are way more probable?
Well, why are they? Well, I mean, saying he's on drugs is not more probable because I have no evidence to believe he's on drugs. You'd have to actually give me a reason, evidence to believe that he's on drugs for that to be an alternative hypothesis, right? So, I mean, when you construct an explanation for a set of data, you have to go with the actual data that you have, not invented speculative.
That would be a new data point, right?
What's that?
That would require a new data point, right?
Right. So if we did a full talk screen and we found out the guy's on LSD, all bets are off, right? So
we have no data.
Okay, Richard,
But we have no data that he wasn't on drugs. Right?
Come on.
No,
I
but
don't have
what?
any data that you're not on drugs, but I have no reason. So I don't have any data that I'm not a brain in a vat, but I think that's a absurd
But
hypothesis,
even
right?
if
But I
some,
can't prove that I'm not. But that's just a mere possibility. That's not even
but
interesting.
the my point is that when you have explanations that are far more probable than a man flying, I think a better epistemology would, before you get any additional data points, is not to assume Richard Dawkins is telling the truth, or is correct, or is of sane mind. Like, I think to have a good epistemology, you would say, probably something else is going on, and the man didn't fly.
Yeah. See, I don't know. I mean, so I'll grant you this. So if Richard Dawkins came to my house and he told me that story, my first question, right? It wouldn't be instant belief, right? So my first question would be, okay, Richard, do you know where you are? Like I'd check, do you know how old you are? Where do you live? What's your social security number?
Yeah, but he could have
You
said
know,
this.
have
He could have saw the
are you
flying
have
man last week, and then
I'd want to smell his breath. I'd want to make sure, I would check for any signs of reasons to disbelieve him, any defeaters. Richard, are you pulling my leg? Is there a hidden camera somewhere? Is this some kind of show? Um, all these things. So, but if it seems like he is 100% sincere and in sound mind, at that point I'd be like, all right, well, tell me more about this. I mean, I would be really inclined to believe him. I'd probably want to keep investigating,
were you
but
a
I would really be inclined to believe him.
were you a rebel when you were a teenage boy?
I don't know. Was I? I don't know.
Did you get in
I
trouble
was
with your
kind of,
teachers or your dad, or
yeah, I got in some trouble off and on.
but were you like I was raised sort of like a maverick type of guy that um, just because authority, just because the teachers say something, that doesn't mean they're right. I learned at a very young age that teachers made mistakes, that even my parents made mistakes.
Yeah.
And that got me in trouble because I would reason with my parents, I would reason with my teachers, and let them know the errors of their ways. And sometimes, of course, many
Yeah,
times I
well,
was wrong.
that was very much like me.
Okay, so I'm trying to just pinpoint how much you value authority
Not
because
much.
so when you first became a Christian, it wasn't like you viewed the Bible as special a priori. This is
Not at
like an
all.
okay. That's interesting.
Yeah, I'd never really even read it.
So was your main reason for then becoming a Christian what I described tonight on Facebook? That it was this
Yeah,
experience?
it was an experience, absolutely. I mean, it was also the testimony. I mean, there was testimony of people talking about their experiences and what they believed and how God had changed their lives. And I had friends who I'd been talking with, the guy who invited me to the concert. So I had testimonial evidence. I had this experience, but that was about it. I was like the Apostle Paul. I was hostile. People didn't like to talk to me about religion. I
Hmm.
made a few people cry.
So what defeaters have you considered for that experience?
Um, well, I knew I wasn't on any drugs or anything. I mean, I didn't have a so that would be one kind of defeater, right? So another kind of defeater would be like wishful thinking, like you had this idea of some kind of experience that would happen, you really wanted it to happen, so it's sort of like a self-fulfilling prophecy of some kind. But I had no categories for this. I'd never seen anything like this. I'd never been in any kind of meeting like this in my life.
So what
It
did
was
you
all
see?
completely new. What's that?
What did you see?
Well, I mean, the concert, people talking about their faith, listening to this music. At the end, there was like an invitation. You could come forward. This was all brand new to me.
But
So
this
it wasn't. Yeah, go ahead.
but this is what led you to become a Christian?
Yeah, the initial um, belief. Yeah, and other defeaters would be, you know, being, you know, that there was this really persuasive speaker or something who just was manipulating emotions, but there wasn't really anybody like that. It was, in between songs, some of the band members would just share stories of their lives. And those stories were certainly, I mean, I don't remember them specifically, but I'd
But
never
there
heard
was
anything
music,
like
right?
that about what's that?
Isn't music a great way to manipulate emotion?
Oh yeah, for sure.
So why didn't you use that
Um,
as defeater?
well, it could be. I mean, but just the fact that music was being played, I mean, and that plays on people's emotions. Emotions are not something you have to completely chop off to make decisions. I mean, a person is a whole person that is consists of your intellect, your emotions, and your will, and they should all have a part to play in making decisions because we're not computers. You know, we're not Mr. Spock. We're human beings, and so sometimes emotions can or
But
non-cognitive factors can be a problem, but sometimes they can actually aid you in bypassing intellectual barriers that have been set up.
did you consider yourself a Christian the following day?
Yeah, that night. I
Okay.
mean, I went and told all my friends. They all freaked out.
And if I would have met you that night and said, "Do you believe that Jesus rose from the dead?" You would have said,
I guess so. I mean, I didn't really know much of what I was getting into at that point. I guess I would have said, yeah, I suppose so.
or what did being a Christian mean to you at that night?
Well, at that point, I would say all I knew was that I knew God was real. I knew there was a God, and um, and because it had happened in this Christian context, and because someone had explained the gospel to me, the idea that Jesus had died to pay for my sins, and by placing my faith in Him, that I could have a relationship with God, and I prayed and asked, you know, invited Christ to save me. Um, it was a very simple thing. I had a very basic level understanding, but I'd say all it meant was I believed there was a God, and I guess I believed that Jesus was His Son, and
So if this exact same
um,
experience happened to you in Pakistan, you would be a Muslim today?
I suppose so.
And would you say that the core tenets of Islam would be true?
I probably would. I mean, that's assuming all things being equal, right?
Do you
So
think the core tenets of Islam is true?
no,
You see the problem there?
no. What's the problem? I mean, a person can be perfectly justified in believing something that's not true.
I don't care. I'm not talking about justification. I'm talking about how do I put this? I know you're an epistemologist. I know you've studied philosophy, and I don't want to get down, have this just go into the weeds of philosophical terms, but let's keep this really simple. You said you had an experience that led you to Christ, that led you to become a Christian. You believe the core. I asked you, would you be, if I asked you, are you a Christian? You said yes that night. Then I
Yeah.
asked
I
if
mean,
you,
I had a very rudimentary understanding of what that meant, of course.
right, but that was the first belief that led down your path, right?
Right.
And then I said, okay, place Chris in Pakistan, and it was similar concert, probably different music, but
Yeah. Some kind of experience.
and you, yeah,
Yeah.
you had some kind of experience, and you admit you would probably be a Muslim today, and you don't believe that Islam had the core principles, tenets of Islam is true, but you probably think they would be true if this experience would happen to you in Pakistan. So the
Sure.
question, so
And if I'd lived 1,000 years ago, I probably would have believed, you know, the earth was flat and the sun went around the earth.
so
And
the
I would
point,
have been justified in believing that.
so so then this guy in Pakistan named
Right.
Chris
Yeah.
meets meets
Chris
uh, meets
Starr.
meets PineCreek, and we start talking about defeaters for his belief in Islam.
Sure. He could give the same kind of account, I suppose.
Yeah, and he tells me, Doug, I've done my research. That was I admit my experience that night at the concert was it was maybe a little bit emotional, but I experienced Allah that night. And but that was just the first step, and then afterward, it was like a whole lifelong journey where I got to know Allah in a real way, and have good reasons to believe
Yeah.
what I believe.
Sure. That's fine.
Now the question is, I look at Pakistani Chris, and I look at American Chris. How in the world would I tell the difference between you two guys and figure out what's actually true?
Well, because, we talked about the cumulative case. That's kind of where this all started. I think when you actually look at the cumulative case for different religions, Christianity's is actually far more powerful.
Says American Chris. And if I was to ask Pakistani Chris, he would say, "Oh man, I have a cumulative case for Islam."
That's where I'd have to say I'm not really sure what Pakistani Chris would say, because, in my own personal research, which is limited, looking at the evidence and the arguments for different religions, there just is a lot more evidence for Christianity.
And
Pakistani Chris might say, well, that doesn't matter, I just have faith, or something like that.
No, Pakistani Chris is just like you, says, I think I have way more evidence, in fact, better evidence for Islam.
Well, he might, right? So this is where I have to take issue with the thought experiment and say, because I'm not saying this is a subjective matter. I'm not saying it's like it feels stronger to me. I'm saying that the cumulative case, the number of arguments, the amount of archaeological evidence for historical facts, the testimonial evidence is far outweighs the evidence for Islam. I think that's an objective, like, demonstrable fact.
Can something have more
data
points?
But I think a Muslim would say that doesn't matter.
Like,
what's that?
We were mentioning data points before, like the creed, the changed lives. Can a belief system have more data points than Christianity and still be false?
More data points. Let's see. What would that mean exactly? Yeah, I mean, because data points, the number of data points is not the only relevant consideration. It's the coherence of the data points.
Right, and the quality of the data points.
Right, sure.
Yep, I agree. So just because we keep adding things, more data, doesn't mean that the belief that's underlying it's true, right?
Right, because we could, with the case of the resurrection, let's say we discovered an extra text later on, and it said, and Joe saw Jesus, and Mary saw Jesus, and Tom saw Jesus, and Bill saw Jesus, and you just list like a million different people. I don't think that would really increase my credence much. I don't know. I've never thought about that before, but that's just more of the same kind of data. I don't know if they were like, if somehow we could establish these were actual people that lived. I don't know, but that would just be more of the just repetitive data points. It wouldn't dramatically increase the credence.
Yeah.
So, but I think you make a good point with your thought experiment, because I do think our initial skepticism about the flying man, we are similar on that, and I think you can be very reasonable in your continued skepticism and not moving much at all, and the needle doesn't move for you at all given these additional data points, but it does move for me. And we could probably go into a long exploration of why the needle moves more for me than you.
How much would you, like, if we were to pie chart it, your belief in Christianity, the cause of your belief in Christianity?
Oh, the cause.
Yeah, like, I know the initial cause was this experience, but would you say it's like 50% experience, 50% the textual evidence that we talked about tonight? Or how would you allocate it?
Like, what's currently sustaining my belief?
Yeah.
I'd say experience is a pretty small part. I'd say, well, this is hard to assign percentages to, but I'd say maybe 25% or something like that. Okay. It would be a minority for sure.
Yeah, that's a question from Aaron Aldridge in the chat. I think it's a really good question, because it's interesting that the beginning of your belief, it sounds like it was almost 100%, and then as you get older, it's shrinking.
Yeah, well, that's just because you have more evidence, right? So if I have one piece of evidence, then 100% of my evidence is that piece of evidence. But if I gather 99 more bits of evidence, then each one becomes just 1%.
But so you could still have more experiences, right?
Oh yeah, sure, you could. I haven't had anything like that one since then. I've had a few, but nothing quite like that.
How old were you when this experience happened?
21.
21. Were you in college?
Yeah. Junior in college.
Can you remember the month?
March 17th, St. Patrick's Day.
March. Do midterms happen in March?
I
think they do.
I don't know.
The reason why I ask is because not to demean your
Was I under stress?
Yeah, not to demean your experiences, but I've been doing interviews like this for a while, and these experiences tend to happen between the ages of 18 and 22. They coincide with, hormones and sleep deprivation and stress and, trying to figure out who you are as a man or a woman. And so I don't think it's a coincidence that there's a lot of religious experiences during that time in life, and it goes down as you get older.
Yeah, it does. No, you're absolutely right. Those are all reasons to be cautious about religious experience.
Yeah.
Especially depending on your circumstances and your age and all those sorts of things. And believe me, I've hashed over this in my mind many, many times. But it just has stood the test of time that there's no better explanation.
There's no better explanation than it actually from God.
Than a veridical experience.
Huh. See, that's where I would strongly disagree with you. I like you as a guy, but I would strongly, vehemently disagree with you there. I'd say that...
Well, and part of that is because our total evidence is different, right? You have a different set of evidence than I have. I mean, you didn't have the experience, so...
How do you know that?
Well, you didn't have my experience.
There you go. I didn't have your exact experience, but I was a Christian for 30 years, and I had a lot of experiences. I experienced Satan pinning me to a bed. All these things that you hear a lot of other Christians talk about, even today. I experienced those things. And so, but let me drive how strongly I disagree with you. I think not only are you possibly wrong about the attribution of your experience, I think it's highly, highly, highly probable that you are wrong, that you are flat out wrong what you attribute your experience to. Now, I think you did experience something, but what you attribute it to, I think is probably like 99% wrong. And the reason why I'm that confident...
Sure. Well, of course you would. I mean, you don't believe in God, so...
Well, no. Even... I would say I could probably find a Jew who would agree with me here, an Orthodox Jew. The reason for that is because why I brought up the Pakistani, Chris. We have millions, if not billions, of examples in history of people having religious experiences that they attribute to certain deities or certain phenomena that are contradictory to each other. So they can't. We know they cannot all be true.
Well, see, but that's why the cumulative case is so important, Doug. My faith does not rest on this one single experience. Now, granted, initially that's how I came in, right? But if I remain that way indefinitely, if I didn't then begin to reflect on and examine my belief and
this is what happens.
Review the arguments against.
But what happens to Pakistani Chris when he has this amazing experience of Allah? And he's set on that path.
Yeah, I mean,
what's going to happen each time he looks at data points, even data points that go against to try to defeat Islam, like let's say Christianity.
Well, it's a possibility of confirmation bias. There's all kinds of biases, right?
Yes. So how do we lower those types of biases?
Well, you can't eliminate bias, but the best you can do is to be aware of your biases and correct for them as much as you can by investigating more than you normally would, by raising your skeptical level a little bit more, by hesitating to embrace things a little bit more.
Especially things of low prior probability.
Those are all perfectly reasonable things to do. What's that?
Be hesitant to embrace certain things, especially those with lower prior probability.
Yes.
I agree.
Yeah. But if you have an experience, so you've seen the movie Contact, right?
Oh yeah, a long time ago.
Or read the book, right?
I didn't read the book, but
one of the points in the book, I don't want to use the book for something it wasn't meant to do, but is all the data seems to point to the fact that her experience, the pilot's experience, was not real. But she cannot deny the experience. She said it was so real, I would have to deny reason. I would have to deny my own senses to say that it didn't happen. And so an experience can be so powerful and so profound that it overcomes those low priors and the hesitation.
I agree with you, but I think, in my personal opinion, again, I like you. I think you're a good guy, but I think
likewise.
But I think you would be absolutely silly to believe that experience at a rock concert or Christian rock concert is in any way an attribution to a deity, given the billions of experiences like that, there's probably a Chris Gadsden in every religion in the world.
So let me ask you this. The fact that there are so many different kinds of religious experience, how does it follow from that I should not under any circumstances believe in my own?
Should not? Because
Well, that's what you're saying, right?
Yeah, because what I said, that a vast majority of these attributions are contradictory to each other. So unless
Right,
you
which
unless
means
you want to
they
believe,
can't all be true.
right? So unless you want to believe,
It doesn't mean they're all false.
that's true, but you should lower your confidence that it's true by a lot lower than you are now.
Well, I think that's going to depend on quite a few things. So it's going to depend on the cumulative case, right? So it's going to depend on corroboration from other sources of evidence.
No.
It's going to depend on the magnitude of the experience and all this.
We already discussed the cumulative case, and we kind of put that on the shelf now. Now we're talking about your experiences. And my point is, it's because of your experiences is it's leading you to how you view the cumulative case. So just like Pakistani Chris, he had this experience of Allah. Muslims have cumulative cases for their belief. Mormons have cumulative cases for their belief. And so what guides them...
They're not as good, but they do have them.
You do realize that everything you're saying could be said by them, right? And so
it could be said, but that doesn't make it true.
Yeah. And what you say doesn't make it true either, right? So
no, it doesn't.
So the question is, how do we figure out what is true? And here's my theory. Tell me what you think of it.
Yeah.
When it comes to having all these biases and how your worldview colors how you view evidence, wouldn't it be amazing if we took, let's say, I don't know, a dozen major worldviews from all over the world, and for every claim of significance, of value, we have these different worldviews give their opinion on it. And if all these different worldviews come
Get their opinion on what?
On this claim. And if all these different...
which claim? The flying man?
No, it doesn't matter what the claim is. We have a claim, okay?
Oh, okay.
And if we have 12 different worldviews from all different geographies around the world coming to the same conclusion of this claim, either yay or nay, yes or no, true or false, I think we're onto something there. That people...
Sure, yeah, that would be evidence, yeah.
No, that would be strong evidence that we have controlled for bias. That we have at least controlled for it. Now, what types of things can you think of where people of different religions, different cultures, different geographies, societies agree on core claims? Can you think of any?
Mathematics.
Yes, mathematics. Some really hardcore science stuff like the acceleration due to gravity.
Sure.
You notice that it's these empirical or even just proof type stuff that we have agreement on. And my point is this. Out of all the different claims in the world, it seems like religion is at the bottom of the barrel for agreement. Right?
That's an interesting way to put it, but I take your point. Yeah, I get your point.
Okay. And so if I admit I have biases, but when I hear Christians talk about the cumulative case, and then I hear Orthodox Jews talk about these data points, and I hear Muslims talk about these data points, and I hear Mormons talk about these data points, and they all come up with different answers on, well, what's a minimal fact and what isn't, and did this really happen or not? And I'm thinking, maybe that's good reason to lower our confidence in these things. That maybe when we open up the Gospels, we're not reading all history. Maybe there's a lot of fiction in there.
Yeah, no, I take your point. I mean, this is why, like I was pushing on Facebook today, that if you disbelieve in, say, Christianity, you ought to have some reasons. And these are the kind of reasons you could bring out to say why you might be skeptical about the claims of a particular religion. I think you can make that argument.
Well, we've been going
it's not a bad case.
We've been going close to an hour and a half. Do you want to hear my thought experiments? Very quickly?
Oh, you've got more?
No, sorry. My thought experiments, but they're much shorter than the cumulative case.
I want to hear your story. Can you give me a quick, like a 1-minute synopsis of your story of your
Oh, sure.
journey from
I'm going to try to
faith
break it.
to?
Listen fast, because I'm going to try to break a record on how quickly I can do this. I was born and raised in Manitoba, Canada, into a Mennonite family culture. So I started out with very conservative Christian type beliefs, pacifists, Anabaptists. Kind of left the Mennonite church when I was probably 15, 16, 17. Went off to university to get my first degree. Met a girl, ended up in a Pentecostal church, and my view of Jesus and God turned from more legalistic to more experiential, experienced the love and forgiveness and joy of Jesus Christ. Got married, ended up in the United States, went to probably 4 or 5 different denominations in the United States, ranging from Baptist to Presbyterian to non-denominational. Oh, I went to a seeker-sensitive type church, Willow Creek model, back in Canada. I've been in almost every type of denomination, Protestant denomination, every flavor, seen all the different types of worship styles, talked to people of different Christian flavors. Started doubting when I was 35, and what caused me to doubt was doing exactly what I'm doing with you here, and that is seeing my beliefs from the perspective of a third party. So instead of me just talking about my beliefs, I was attacking my own beliefs from the outside of myself.
Sure. Yeah.
In other words, providing my own defeaters. And but I think what really helped me to lower my biases from Christianity was to stop fearing hell, to stop desiring heaven, although I never was huge on heaven. And so I was willing to go to hell for the truth. And I think as soon as a conservative Christian of any sort admits that they're willing to go to hell and they're not scared of hell, if their hell exists and hell is real, if they're willing to say, I'm willing to doubt the core tenets of Christianity, even to that, knowing that that's what's at stake. Very few people, I think, have the gonads to do that. Let's see. And so, yeah, began doubting at 35, left at age 40. I'd say called myself a deist for a year. But deism is like being on the top of a mountain. And depending which way the wind blows, you either fall back into the theist camp or atheist camp. And so I call myself an atheist today.
Wow. What a story. That's
How
really
long did that
interesting.
take? 2 minutes? 3 minutes?
That was fast. Yeah, that was good.
I'll just ask you which one should I ask you? Okay, I know what I'll ask you. I'm asking this based on your personality type. This is one I've probably asked 30 people so far. Not too many. Thought experiment where you and I are in a car together. We both get in a car accident, both instantly die. You and me go up to the pearly gates, go up to heaven or wherever, and Jesus looks at you, Chris, and says, well done, good and faithful servant. I'm so proud of you, Chris. Then Jesus looks at me, says, Doug, what's with your YouTube channel? What are you doing? Oh, man. Sorry, Doug, you got to go to we can't come into heaven. I won't even say the word hell. Well, no, Doug, you can't go to heaven, which means you go to hell. By the way, the traditional view of heaven and hell is true in this thought experiment.
Okay.
So the question is for you that if God were to say to you, Chris, I'll tell you what, I see that you kind of like Doug. I kind of like Doug. If you're willing to give up heaven, Doug won't go to hell. But you're not going to switch. I'm just going to annihilate you both. Just going to annihilate you both. So you won't even know you're missing anything.
If I don't switch, I get annihilated.
There's no switching.
Wait.
All you have to say is, God, I'm willing to give up heaven so Doug doesn't have to go to hell. The question I
have to not just say it, but actually intend it. Actually,
God knows your thoughts. So
right.
So the question for you is, do you take that deal? Do you say, God, I'm willing to give up heaven so Doug doesn't have to go to hell. We both get annihilated. Done deal.
Wow. That's a tough one. I'm immediately called to mind, Paul, the Apostle Paul considers something like this. in Romans, I think it is, he talks about his countrymen, his fellow Jews, and he says, I'd be willing to be condemned if they could be saved. And that's a really powerful, and that's even more than what you're
Do
saying.
you
Like
take the deal?
What's that?
Do you take the deal?
Well, I'm thinking it through, right? I don't jump into these things. So,
most people that I've asked this question to, they've answered within 10 seconds, and most of them have answered, I'd say 80% of them have answered, no, I don't take that deal. Doug goes to hell, I go to heaven.
wow. Yeah, man, it's a really tough one because there's a very strong pull to want to go to heaven.
What would Jesus do?
Well, we know exactly what he did, but
Yeah,
of
what
course
did he do?
he wasn't annihilated.
Right, but
What's that?
he sacrificed himself. Would you be willing to sacrifice heaven for Doug?
But you don't get to go to heaven. That's the bummer, is you just get annihilated.
Yeah, but you
you
saved
don't
me
have
for
to go to
eternal
hell,
torment.
which is pretty nice.
Yeah.
That's actually pretty good. It's a pretty good deal.
Do you believe in the traditional form of heaven? Hell, I mean?
And, well, what do you mean, like a lake of fire and brimstone, that sort of thing?
Well, no, that just is punishment. It's eternal punishment. That's really, really, really bad.
Yeah, whatever it is, it's really, really bad. I assume it's probably eternal. I don't think about it a ton, but
do you think it's
my
fair?
views are
Do you think it's fair that
fair.
my disbelief
Shoot.
wants me?
From a human perspective, no, it doesn't. Oh, it's not because of disbelief. I mean, you know that much, right?
No, my disbelief in the resurrection. I don't believe that Jesus Christ died.
But that's not. I mean, God doesn't punish people for having the wrong beliefs, right? I mean, it's sin. It's what.
Well, I can introduce you to a few Christians if you want, and who will disagree with you there.
Well, now this is a point of contention. Without getting on a rabbit trail, I mean, what the actual correct view of Christianity is not determined by.
Are you a Calvinist or non-Calvinist?
What's that?
Are you a Calvinist or non-Calvinist?
I'm not a Calvinist. Yeah.
Okay.
But it's not determined. What the actual truth is not determined by consensus of people interviewed on the street, right?
In one sentence, who goes to heaven?
What's that?
In one sentence, who goes to heaven?
People who have called upon Lord for mercy.
Okay. I have not done that. I have in the past, but I don't believe.
Hey, maybe you're still going,
But
eternal security.
But I've rejected it. So the question I have for you is...
Yeah, I don't know what happens when you do that. I wonder about that.
My question for you is, do you believe... In fact, this is a guy in the chat. His name is Joe DiPilato. He's a Christian. He's been on my channel for over a year now as a sub. He's asked this question. Do you think it's fair? Do you think it's just for me to spend eternity in this really, really bad place because I haven't called out to the Lord?
From a human perspective, no. But my understanding, this is one of those mysteries that I have to just admit I don't understand. And I'm okay not understanding everything about Christianity. This is one of the ones I have to sort of say, I don't really understand how this works, but I do trust God. I have such a firm conviction in his goodness and his justice that whatever happens, it will be just.
Okay. You have kids, right?
That is where my faith is.
I'm going to test you here.
But so back to your question, man.
Well, think about it. Get back.
I guess I'd be willing to be annihilated.
Oh, good for you. You're in the 20 percentile.
Seems like the virtuous thing to do, I guess. I suppose I won't really know the difference.
Yeah, it's interesting that you're willing to annihilate me, but God isn't.
Yeah.
Does that bother you?
It's a hypothetical, though, right?
I know, but does that bother you that if it's true that I'm going to hell, that because God does not let me into heaven, that's the default situation I'm in?
Well, I have a particular perspective on relationship with God that requires consent, right? So I don't believe God brings people into a relationship with himself without consent.
Right, but the question is not about consent. The question is, you have two boxes, heaven and hell, and God controls the heaven box.
Yeah. Well, if the traditional view is correct, then annihilation would not be just. That's why I'm not an annihilationist.
Why is annihilation not just?
Well, I mean, according to the traditional view, that there must be atonement for sin.
Yeah,
And if
but
Jesus is not your
Jesus did.
atonement, then you are.
Oh, Jesus didn't die for me.
Well, Jesus did die for you, but as they say, it's sufficient
I shouldn't
for
ask that
everyone.
question because Christians argue about this all the time, like whether
Right, they do.
and this is why there's
Right, but
Calvinists.
it's like when you get a financial aid letter in the mail and you have to accept it or not, or
I want to
it
ask you a
doesn't.
couple more thought experiments.
All right, let's do like one more, and then let's
One
call it a
more.
night.
Okay, one more.
We can always do part 2 sometime.
It's the time of Noah. You're up in heaven with God, with Yahweh. And he says to you, oh, actually, I should ask you this first. Do you believe the Noah story, that God flooded the earth, or
Yeah.
at least part of it? Okay, good.
I believe it was probably a localized flood, but yeah, I do believe he destroyed,
Okay.
as far as I can tell, he destroyed all people.
So imagine you're up in heaven with God, with Yahweh, and but you do not know of the Noah story yet. Like this is before it actually happened.
Right. I don't know what's going to happen.
Right. And so, but Yahweh looks at you and says, "Hey, Chris, you see all those people down there? Oh, they're heinous. They're full of debauchery and chicanery, but
Yeah.
except for Noah's family.
Right.
These guys are great. Noah and his family. I'm going to save them, but I'm going to execute my justice on everybody else, and I'm going to do it one of two ways, and both are moral and just because I'm the one doing it," says Yahweh. So by definition, it's good, moral and just. And so here's the two ways. The first way is that I flood all those people, including women, children, toddlers, babies, even pregnant women. I'm going to flood them. I'm going to send rains, and I'm going to purposely drown them. I'm going to flood them, and animals as well. The second way is I'll just poof them out of existence.
Right.
And so now Yahweh asks you, which of these two moral forms of executing my justice do you prefer?
Gosh, let's see. Probably poof.
Yes. Can we get a 1,000 pine points for you? That is the correct answer.
Well, here's the thing, though, Doug, is that, I mean, every person has reasons for action, right? And just like evidence is relative to individuals, your reasons are relative to individuals. God has not only more complex and numerous reasons than I have, but he has reasons that I probably couldn't even understand. So, but given my reasons, given my perspective as a human being, that seems like the better way to go. But I don't for a second think that God did the wrong thing, because from his perspective, whatever his reasons are, it could very, very easily be the correct thing to do from his perspective.
So you would say that God
he may have reasons that
But God, by definition, there's nothing God can do that's wrong, right? So the whole concept of God doing things even possibly wrong is out the window, right?
No, not possibly wrong, but just, I mean, sometimes he has options between various good things, right? And none of them are wrong, right? He could, if I'm praying for a parking spot, he could give me a parking spot here or here or here.
Is there anything?
There's not like a wrong parking spot, right?
Is there anything Yahweh could do where you would stop worshiping him?
I'd have to think about that. I suppose there would be.
Oh, great answer.
Yeah.
A lot of people would say.
Thanks for your applause.
A lot of people would say, no, there's nothing God could do. I would worship him no matter what. But even if God's real, even if Yahweh is real, I still think there should be things in every Christian's life that they would say, if Yahweh did this, I would stop worshiping him. I'd rather be in hell. Yeah.
Well, it's funny because I'd have to think about what that scenario would look like, but I think there is a possible scenario.
Yeah, what if he drowns one of your kids?
The truth is that this happens all the time, right? I mean, your child dies and people just walk away, So I totally get that.
What if God says, I want to drown all your children? It's moral just. I don't need to tell you why. I have morally sufficient reasons, but I'm going to drown them. And
that would be a tough one, man.
It'll take 60 seconds. It'll take 60 seconds to kill them. They'll suffer. Would you still worship God?
I can't give an instant answer to that question. These things
But it
are
seemed
a
like
process.
it seemed like you gave an instant answer with the flood, though, that you would, God has some morally sufficient reasons for the flood. And
Well, if he's asking me, if he said, I want to end the lives of your kids, should I drown them or just poof them out of existence? I mean, I'd prefer the less painful way. That's just being a compassionate human.
but the fact
But
that he did drown people back in Genesis, which you believe happened,
right.
it seemed like you were hesitating when I brought that to your own children.
Yeah, I would hate it a lot more than, a bunch of strangers I never met. But that's just human nature, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, if God told me that and then he drowned my kids, man, I don't know. That would really shake my faith for sure.
Yeah, would me too.
Might be enough. I don't know. But those things are things you have to walk through and then see what happens on the other side. It's hard to predict, This is just intellectual virtue of caution, right? Just saying, okay, I'm not going to form an opinion about this too quickly. I want to think about it, contemplate, read up on it, maybe, pray about it. I don't know. But it's a good question. All right, that was 2. You snuck in an extra one on me.
It's my nature. I'm under the power of the evil one. Okay, well, thanks, Chris, for hanging out with me tonight. That was fun.
Yeah, it was fun, Doug. We should do it again.
Okay, have a good night. Just press the X and you're out of here.
All right, you too. You have a good night too, and press the X.
Hey, well, actually, stay there for a second. I want to show you something.
Oh, okay.
Let me show you something. See, if I was Yahweh and if you were not Noah, I would go poof.
Thanks, I appreciate that.
You're welcome. Okay, get out of here. That was fun. I'm glad he said poof. I'm glad he said he would annihilate himself for me. Cam Spires is using big words in the chat. I'm telling you, if you're a Christian listening, your experiences that you attribute to Yahweh or Jesus are probably wrong. Thanks for the question, Joe. Thanks for the donations. I hope I caught them all. Let me check. Yeah, I think so. Thanks for hanging out, guys. Have a great evening.